We're continuing our study of Proverbs on Sunday evenings. Understand we're going through this thematically rather than chronologically or in order that the passages appear in Proverbs. And so we're skipping around a little bit as we look at a number of things. Some nights we'll cover perhaps an entire passage or an entire proverb. But tonight we're focusing on just one single verse, one single proverb. And it comes from Proverbs chapter 28, verse 1. It says this: "The wicked man flees though no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion." And so it's a proverb that contrast, makes a contrast between the actions of the wicked man and the actions of the righteous. And the main difference is that the wicked flees out of cowardice, but the righteous responds out of courage. It was several years ago when the faith-based movie came out, Courageous. Some of you might remember. I think our men's ministry rented a theater. Perhaps I remember going to view that movie with some of my brothers here at Robinson Avenue. Really good movie. They don't make many good movies anymore, but this was a really good one. If you haven't seen it yet, you could still rent it or stream it, and I would recommend it. I won't give too much away, but as you could gather just from the title of the movie, it's a movie about courage. But what is courage? Well, the main characters in the movie were all law enforcement. They were all policemen. And in the minds of some, that would automatically make them courageous, and for good reason. I mean, these are men who protect our rights and who defend us and sometimes place themselves in the line of fire. Other times they are in high-speed chases, sometimes in physical altercations with suspects. And so really a dangerous line of work and one that requires courage. But if you've seen the tagline on the movie posters, it says this. It says, "Courage begins at home." And the point of the movie is that there's more to being courageous than just being in a dangerous profession. That it also has to do with how you lead your family. It also has to do with being a stand-up person and being willing to accept responsibility for our own actions. And there's some link between being courageous and being righteous. And that brings us to the point of this short proverb. Recently, I read an article that suggested that perhaps courage is in short supply, and the author had in mind one particular event and circumstance, but I think that observation has application for church and for home and for society. Courage, it seems, is in short supply everywhere. When John F. Kennedy was running for public office, he wrote a book with the help of a prominent historian, a book entitled Profiles in Courage. And it was a bestseller. People wanted to read about and be inspired by people of courage. And sometimes we might wonder if all the courageous people are in our history, only in our history books. So we know of people like Dr. Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela or Winston Churchill. And sometimes our faith in that fact is shaken when we hear examples of people who are less than courageous. I remember a news story from a number of years ago about the captain of an Italian cruise ship who bailed from his ship while the ship was going down. He was one of the first to exit the boat. And his story was that he fell and he tripped and fell in the lifeboat. How convenient is that? People started calling him Chicken of the Sea. Well, this short proverb holds out hope that not only can we find examples of courage, but we can be people of courage. When we live righteously, we can be courageous people who act courageously even in difficult circumstances. And so let's look at the two parts of this verse. First, let's talk about the cowardice of the wicked. It's a comical image that's presented here when it says, the wicked man flees, though no one pursues. There's an Oriental proverb that says, "The leaf cracked and your servant fled." And so there's this image of a person just stepping foot on a leaf, and he's so spooked by that, just the sound of that he he flees, he runs away immediately, takes off running. We have an expression, we talk about people who are afraid of their own shadow. That's kind of the same sense. We have at home, we have a dog named Eve. She's 10 years old, been with us those 10 years. And she's afraid of her own shadow. If you raise or lower your voice, she'll just cower. And it seems like she's getting more frightened with age. I mean, she's always been afraid of loud noises and fireworks and thunderstorms and slamming car doors, but even more so now. And this passage speaks of fear when there is no reason to fear. And again, it's linked somehow. This fear is linked with wickedness. And one thing we could say about wicked people is that wicked people are disobedient people. I think we would all agree with that. And the psalmist gives some characteristics of wicked people in Psalm 53. Let's look at that psalm together. Psalm 53. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt and their ways are vile. There is no one who does good. God looks down from heaven on all mankind to see if there are any who understand, any who seek God. Everyone has turned away and become corrupt. There's no one who does good, not even one. Do all these evildoers know nothing? They devour my people as though eating bread. They never call on God. But there they are, overwhelmed with dread, where there was nothing to dread. God scattered the bones of those who attacked you. You put them to shame, for God despised them. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion when God restores his people. Let Jacob rejoice and Israel be glad. And just listen to these characteristics. It begins with a refusal to believe in the existence of God. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. We know creation itself testifies to God's existence, and yet there are people that are so stubborn that they refuse to believe that there's anyone higher, any entity higher than ourselves. And that lack of belief inevitably leads to a lack of character. There's corruption. There's no one who's seeking God. There's people who devour one another just as they eat bread. Well, how does this result in fear? Well, we'll look at another Old Testament text with me. Look at Leviticus chapter 26, starting in verse 36. Leviticus 26, 36. And the context of this entire chapter is about the rewards of obedience and the punishments of disobedience. And much is in the form of a warning. Now, there are 13 verses that talk about rewards. There are 43 verses, though, that talk about punishments. But there's one consequence of disobedience that I want us to see just for the purposes of this study and as it relates to the proverb that we have in mind tonight. Leviticus 26, starting in verse 36. As for those of you who are left, I will make their hearts so fearful in the lands of their enemies that the sound of a wind-blown leaf will put them to flight. They will run as though fleeing from the sword, and they will fall even though there is no one pursuing them. They will stumble over one another as fleeing from the sword, even though no one is pursuing them. So you will not be able to stand before your enemies. You will perish among the nations. The land of your enemies will devour you. Those of you who are left will waste away in the lands of their enemies because of their sins. Also because of their ancestors' sins, they will waste away. Is that not exactly what our proverb says? It talks about the wicked fleeing when no one pursues. And that's the warning that is given to Israel. Maybe it's the result of a guilty heart. Maybe it's fear of judgment. But for whatever reason, a windblown leaf sets them to running. They think that someone is coming after them with a sword when no one is pursuing them. And as a result, they trip and fall over their own swords. And their enemies are going to win just by doing nothing. Kind of reminds me of the story of Gideon's forces in Judges chapter 7. Of course, Gideon and his men were on the right side of that conflict. But you remember Gideon started with 22,000 men. And God whittles that down to 10,000 men. It's still too many. And God gets them down to just 300 men, and they're going to go out and engage a much, much larger, stronger, more formidable Midianite force. And what's more impressive is they're going to do that armed with just trumpets and pitchers and torches. I mean, those aren't the weapons of choice that I would choose if I were to go into battle. And next, those 300 men are divided into three companies, and at night they surround the Midianite camp, and at Gideon's signal, they blow their trumpets, they break their jars. And do you remember the Midianites' response? It's complete chaos. They go throughout the camp killing themselves in the dark, simply out of fear. An early church father had this quote: "Such is the nature of sin that it betrays while no one accuses. It makes the sinner a timid being, one that trembles at a sound, even as righteousness has a contrary effect." We encounter numerous examples in the Bible of men and women, sometimes godly men and women, who on certain occasions responded with fear rather than faith. Great examples of faith, like Abraham. Even Abraham had his moments. For example, lying about his relationship with his wife, calling her his sister because he was afraid for his own life, or the great prophet Elijah running in fear from Jezebel. This is right after his great victory against the prophets of Baal. And the New Testament, you have Peter vowing that he will follow the Lord to his death, just as Jesus has predicted but just as Jesus predicted, when the heat was on, he denied Christ. He responded out of fear rather than faith. And so even those examples of godly men still had their moments when they were weakened by fear. Walter Payton, one of the greatest running backs in the NFL, he wasn't a very big guy in stature. He was about my size. But Payton at one time held the NFL rushing record, 16,726 yards. That means that during his 12-year career, he ran and carried the ball over 9 miles. Now, that's not what's most impressive. I could probably run 9 miles if you give me 12 years to do it. But the impressive part was that every time he went about 4.4 yards, he got knocked to the ground by someone bigger than himself. And he kept getting up, and he kept taking that punishment. And it's the endurance that really made him a great running back. Endurance is a factor in all this. We want to be people of courage. And sometimes that means we're going to get knocked down, but it means getting back up, and it means continuing the course. And the second part of this proverb focuses on the courage of the righteous. And it says this: it says, "The righteous are as bold as a lion." There's another proverb in Proverbs 30, verse 30, that says, "A lion mighty among the beasts retreats before nothing." It almost goes without saying that a lion is a great symbol of strength. The country of England long ago chose a lion as its national symbol. Many countries in Africa also used the symbol of a lion. The ancient church father Gregory said, "The lion is not afraid in the onset of beast because he knows well that he is stronger than all of them." It's kind of interesting as you look at Scripture how many times lions are mentioned, how often lions are mentioned. David killed a lion to protect the flock before he killed Goliath. One time in our men's fuel class, we studied a very obscure example from the Old Testament, a man named Benaniah who chased a lion into a pit on a snowy day and killed that lion. Samson killed a lion. Daniel was spared in the lion's den. Satan is compared in 1 Peter to a roaring lion. On the other hand, Jesus is called the Lion of Judah. Apocalyptic visions in Daniel and Revelation include descriptions of lions. There are references to lions throughout the prophetic literature and the wisdom literature, and with good reason. Lions are fierce creatures. There was a movie several years ago that I watched entitled The Ghost in the Darkness. It had Michael Douglas in it. My namesake, Val Kilmer, was in it. And it was based on a true story of a couple of lions in Africa who killed over 130 people in a span of 9 months. This was late 1800s, East Africa. And the name of the movie, The Ghost of the Darkness, is based on the fact that the locals named those two lions the Ghost and the Darkness because they were so terrifying. And they were interfering with the construction of a railway bridge. And so Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas played these two hired guns that were hired to come in and take care of that lion problem. But if you're going to kill a lion, you better be equal to the task because they're fierce and they're not afraid And yet we're told that the righteous can be as bold as lions. So who's righteous? Are you? Am I? Are we righteous? Well, the Bible tells us that Jesus is the source of our righteousness. Look with me in the New Testament, Philippians chapter 3. Philippians chapter 3, and we'll start the reading here in verse 7, read verses 7 through 11. Paul here compares the self-righteousness, the self-righteousness that once characterized his own life with the righteousness that is by faith and comes through Jesus. And so Philippians chapter 3, verses 7 through 11. But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage, that I may gain Christ and being found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ. The righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participate in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow to attain to the resurrection from the dead. And so how does anyone muster the courage to endure suffering and to face death? It's only with the righteousness of Christ. And God's righteousness brings boldness. Look at one more passage with me. This is from 1 John. 1 John chapter 4, verses 16 through 19. Let's see what it says. And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in them. This is how love is made complete among us, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. In this world, we are like Jesus, but there's no fear in love. Perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. We love because he first loved us. And so there's the theme that we've been studying on Sunday mornings and are studying throughout the year. But I want you to notice there where the NIV says confidence. Some versions say boldness. It says we can have boldness on the day of judgment. But if we're going to be as bold as lions, we're going to have to be fully committed to God. And it's his love that has the power to cast out the fear that is in our lives. Now, let's not be cowards like the wicked. Let's be courageous like the faithful and the righteous, just as Proverbs admonishes us, encourages us to do.
One step at a time, dear Savior, I cannot take any more. The flesh is so weak and hopeless, I know not what is before. One step at a time, dear Savior, till faith grows stronger in thee, One step at a time, dear Savior, till hope grows stronger in me. One step at a time, dear Savior, oh, guard my faltering feet. Keep hold of my hand, dear Savior, till I my journey complete. One step at a time, dear Savior, till faith grows stronger in thee, One step at a time, dear Savior, till hope grows stronger in me. One step at a time, dear Savior, thou knowest all of my fear. One word from thy heart, dear Savior, and heaven's mansions appear. One step at a time, dear Savior, o'er the cold, dark mountains, seeking his sheep, or along by Siloam's fountains, helping the weak. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus wherever they go. If they lead through the temple, holy, preaching the word, or in homes of the poor and lowly, serving the Lord. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus wherever they go. By and by through the shining portals, turning our feet, we shall walk with the glad immortals, heaven's golden street. Footprints of Jesus that make the pathway glow. We will follow the steps of Jesus wherever they go. Have you ever stood at the ocean with the white foam at your feet, felt the endless thundering motion? Then I say you've seen Jesus my Lord. Have you seen Jesus my Lord? He's here in plain view. Take a look, open your eyes, he'll show it to you. Have you ever stood at the sunset with the sky bellowing red, seen the clouds suspended like feathers? Then I say you've seen Jesus my Lord. Have you seen Jesus my Lord? He's here in plain view. Take a look, open your eyes, he'll show it to you. Have you ever stood at the cross with the man hanging in pain, seen the look of love in his eyes? Then I say you've seen Jesus my Lord. Have you seen Jesus my Lord? He's here in plain view. Take a look,